So what you're looking at here is the photo of a car in which Franz Ferdinand was sitting on the day he was assassinated in an event that led to World War One. And if you know your history, you know that World War One basically led to World War Two, which basically led to the Cold War, which basically led to the Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran wars, which has led to the modern day. So in other words, everything you think you know about history goes back to an assassination of a man who sat in this car. And if you look at the license plate, what do you notice? A triple I 118. Or in other words, A 11 11 18. Now, why is 11 11 18 important? It just so happens to be the date of the armistice which supposedly ended World War One. That's right, November 11, 1918, the armistice takes place to end World War One, to end the war that was supposedly started when a man in this car was assassinated. What are the odds of that? Well, I've got some questions and some answers. Let's go to Dave J from California. Dave J, you've been saying for a while that war is a hoax. You tell me, what do you make of this license plate, this so-called coincidence? What do you think is happening here?
Okay, yeah, like I was talking earlier about things having a designated end. This is nothing more than a seed. This is shown to people as being the seed or the beginning, and then within the beginning there's already a play for the end, meaning the license plates showing you or pre-telling you what the end is going to be. Because war is a hoax, that's obvious. It's controlled demolition, strategic relocation, and then this, just like everything else, numerology comes into play because that same license plate adds up to 14, which is, of course, can be looked at, with the double seven code I talk about, or simply as the 5, which is bringing in the 5 senses or the people into an event, which then is going to happen within their mind, spiritually within their mind, through news reports, through, death reports and all these other type of things, through military reports, and it's going to give them a history which has already been predetermined by the those that create the play. And this car kind of proves it. It's not only the seed, but is the encapsulation of the idea that's put forth. So had you seen the license plate before and you knew the way they operate, you could have told people, hey, this is going to end on this date, just by the evidence given to you.
So Dave, we've got a license plate on the car that supposedly played a part in the starting of World War One. Its license plate has the date of the end of World War One. To me, it's quite obvious what's happening. To you, it's obvious as well. Hopefully some of the viewers of this video. But some of them will come back, Dave, and they'll say, oh, this is just a coincidence. It's just a coincidence, Dave. Sometimes a car that plays a seminal role in a world event has a license plate of a date 4 years ahead of time. Huh. How do you respond to
Right.
these people, Dave?
Like I say, it's one of those things where if you have a mindset that's already um, set to believe the stories given to you, none of this will make any sense. However, if you take the time to look into these as being, controlled, basically events, hoaxes, where the end result is already plotted out in advance, all of this is just going to be logical, pieces to that story that you've already looked into. It takes time. You need to actually look at each piece of evidence as its own and say, what does this card present to me? It presents to me not only the beginning of the story, but then it presents to me within, numbers, the end of the story. So like I say, it's a full encapsulation of the idea that became World War One, and I think that that can be shown through World War II, through the so-called, any other war that happens. The precursor to that so-called war is also going to be showing you the end result.
Well, Dave, let me get your opinion on this. For me, learning about what I call the war hoax, what you call the war hoax, for me, the first entry point was World War II, and in particular, the V-2 rockets. This was a couple of years ago. I found out that Werner von Braun, who was supposedly in charge of the NASA rockets to the moon, supposedly he was in charge of the V-2 rockets. So I went and looked into those, and I noticed they look like clown rockets. They actually look silly. And I thought, I want to look further into this. So I looked into the official story about V2 rockets. I tried to find photos and other evidence that they were real. And very quickly it became apparent to me that I was dealing with a joke. The V2 rockets were a joke. So that was my entry point into the war hoax. Then I started looking at more recent wars, such as the so-called bombing of Baghdad, which is a complete joke. And I'll play footage of that on the screen right now for the viewers. Complete joke. Check the link in the info box below to the official CNN video. And you tell me if you think this is real. And if you do, there's nothing I can say or do to help you, because you're a lemming. This is clearly a joke. So then I went back and looked at earlier footage from World War One and World War Two, and this is the footage that you were putting out years ago, showing that it looks staged. And Dave, it does look staged. The footage from World War One, it looks as though someone has said, you lay there, I've got to use this camera that takes a couple minutes to get an exposure, just stay still. It actually looks completely staged.
Right. Well, not only that, but you have some where the so-called bodies have a pulse. So you can still see it in their neck. You can see their neck meat, pulsing. And that, corpses shouldn't have pulses. All right, that's one telltale sign. But you also have some that are showing kind of occult symbology within them, kind of the hanging man idea, which is seen recently in the 9/11 so-called falling man, with the leg tucked behind the knee in the hangman position. So you have all these similar symbolic type evidences as well that go through all these different hoaxes. Even going back to when you go back before World War so-called One, and you go into the Civil War in the United States, you had the same story that was used in 9/11, where you had a so-called terrorist attack a Pentagon. And in this case, it was supposed to have been a Native American, so-called Indian, who attacked Fort Sumter, which just so happened to be in the shape of a Pentagon. So you see how you have these similar stories with just slightly changed details for a new generation. So then there's nothing new under the sun, that type of understanding. So these stories, you kind of go with what's worked in the past. And if you attack a head of state, the head of the snake, the head of state, then that brings in an entire country, and they have a reason to then go fight somebody in the battlefield to the death. And of course, it's all nonsense. Every bit
It's all
of it.
complete nonsense. And so the point I would make to people is, if you have identified that one part of this story is nonsense, whether it is Osama bin Laden or Saddam Hussein or V2 rockets or Putin or any of these characters that you're given on the TV screen, if you've identified that some of this is a lie, then it's incumbent on you to consider what else is a lie. And if you look into it far enough, you're going to see it's all a lie right from the very start. Okay, as you know it right now, you've got Putin and Trump and Kim Jong-un and these geopolitical machinations. But if you go back a little while, in the 1980s it was the Iran-Iraq war. The US was funding one side and the Soviets were funding the other. Okay, go back a little while. You've got the Vietnam War. Same thing, it was the Soviets versus the Americans using Vietnam as their little war ground. Go back a little further, it's the Cold War. It's the Soviets versus the US. Go back to World War II. The Soviets and the US were on the same team fighting against Hitler. Go back before that. Why did Hitler come to power? Because after World War One, the Germans were forced to pay too many reparations and the Germans were very upset. Okay. What caused World War One? It was an assassination of Franz Ferdinand. And what was he assassinated in? This car. Or on the day that he was in this car. Look at the license plate. There it is, A111118, right in your face, telling you when the first part of this so-called war is going to end. They even put a letter there, A for armistice. They're telling you this is a joke. And if you can't see the joke, no one can help you see it. You are either a lemming who has no critical capacity for thought whatsoever, or you're willing to consider that you've been deceived, which you have been, if you believe that war is real. Dave J, I'll give you the final thoughts, and what I'll do is I'll put a link in the show notes below this, in the info box below this. People can go and listen to our podcast called Dave J and the War Hoax, available to part members of johnlebon.com. Give us your final thoughts here, Dave J. War is a hoax. I believe it's a hoax. I think they're laughing at the lemmings who can't see this as a hoax. What say you?
Yeah, no, I would say the same thing. It's also that you have specific events, let's say the so-called bombing of London, where you have a population who's told to go underground and to be, be hidden out of the way, and then they hear certain explosions, which in this case is nothing more than controlled demolition of certain parts of the so-called world, and then that's what happens. You have this controlled demolition, which of course we talked about before, goes into the cycle. You have the war cycle, you have the peacetime cycle. So it's these two economies that have to play against each other, and then you need an event to seed the action. And in this case, it's the car with the Archduke in there, and then you have within it the clue given to you at when this is going to end. So if you knew of this, you could already hedge your bets, and you could already plan your that time period for, for, let's say, if you're an industrial, titan, you can plan already for this economy, because it's already telling you how long the so-called wartime economy is going to go. It's going to go to this end date. Therefore, plan on it because it's already written. In this case, on a license plate.